going to put a story up later on tonight, and it shows drone footage over Fukushima. And they got a pretty good look inside of one of the wrecked reactors, I guess. I haven't looked at it in any detail yet. But for those of you who have been with us for a long time, know that Yoichi Shimatsu, former editor of the Japan Times Weekend Edition and one of the world's truly great environmental wizards and reporters. He's a remarkable man. He's bicycled into Fukushima, the danger zone, at least 10 times, and then was able to detoxify himself from the radiation exposure that he suffered. He did so to get the story, and he has been all around the world. He's a great friend of mine and a friend of yours as well, and he's back with us tonight. Hello, Yoshi. Welcome back.
Well, glad to be here and still alive. That's more than I can say about a lot of my acquaintances in Japan who, since Fukushima, over the last 13 years, have faded into the ether, I guess, disappeared and gone.
Right.
Sad.
The trick with dealing with the ether is coming back. Every night when I go to sleep, I look at it as if I'm going into the ether. Because you know what? It's the only safe place you can go anymore, where you're really safe and secure.
That's
Think
true.
about it.
Space is not safe anymore. They've got all kinds of crazy weaponry up there now. Yeah.
Oh, it's nuts, and more than we'd ever imagine.
Yeah.
They've got such tech up there. They've gone crazy. They're drunk on tech. And they can't wait to put it
I've written
up there.
about that. The weird dragon ships have come in, and probably responsible for the strange blasts over Maui, and then the recent thing over the Panhandle.
Now, that was a huge deal. It didn't make the news. It should have around the country. They kind of kept it. I don't know if they kept it quiet, but it took off and ran. That was the biggest wildfire in how long in Texas?
Well, there's actually 6 major fires in the Panhandle, and there was a very bright red flash, just like we saw from Maui, over Texas, and that was after the sightings of. Now, it turns out not only here in New Mexico over the first atomic bomb site, the Trinity site, but also friends in Colorado saw another one without the long attachment in the back, which sent out all the balloons. So the Chinese have been very active. Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, of course, he took off 3 weeks following the exposure of these ships over White Sands Missile Base, and then apparently there was something very similar in Maui over there, and the target. As far as I can tell, was there? That I don't know if people have heard of Pantex. It's
where they make
in
bombs.
Amarillo.
Yeah.
It's in Amarillo. That's where they decommission, but also renew warheads. So along the dew line in Montana, where they spotted that Chinese balloon flying over. A lot of those are very, very old missiles, so they have to renew the nuclear content in the warheads, and you really can't ship them by roads because they irradiate the highways. It's very, very dangerous. So they have these very old train lines that go from the dew line, the defense line, the northern defense line, which is the main U.S. nuclear defense, over the Arctic and over the North Pacific. That's where you would intercept with anti-missile missiles. They would take their warheads, put them on very antiquated trains. It used to be called the White Train, and it would go through the down south through the all this agricultural area, cattle, where there's a lot of cattle range and all. You go in between towns and through Oklahoma, Kansas, Oklahoma, and you can wind your way down, and you would hit the Panhandle, and then drop them off in Amarillo at the Pantex plants, where they'd be renewed, and the same train would take them back up, and you would rearm your warhead. Well, that little train line doesn't exist anymore. The fires took them out. So basically, we cannot renew nuclear warheads along the main U.S. anti-missile defense line now. From now on,
the other side of that coin, and you know this very well, and many of you listening may know this. Our last Minuteman II ICBM production run was in the early 1970s or the mid-70s. Yeah. We haven't built an ICBM except for the Tridents in 50 years. And they can renew the warheads all they want, but what about the rest of it?
Well, that's why these are very antiquated missiles. All they've got to do is go up, many miles into lower space and explode just to stop incoming, basically destroy incoming missiles coming in. Very simple concept, but without decent warheads on there, renewed warheads, which we're not going to have because I don't think we're going to be rebuilding that railway under Biden's infrastructure plan. It's an antiquated old railway from the days they were shipping cattle, from Texas up to Kansas City. It's a very old line. I don't think that's going to, and they have wooden ties and all that. It's not going to be renewed now.
No, not the safest at all.
Well, it's in the middle of nowhere, and the train could go very slowly, which would be better, And so it was a workable system, and they didn't renew it because it was working, but that's basically gone. The fires have taken that. There's been 6 separate fires there, major fires, so it was not a natural event, And then, as you know, the storms have been going there. There's been a lot of wind, but there's also been a lot of moisture, and all that's from Fukushima. These constant streams we're getting from winter through spring and early summer and even midsummer. These winds that are crossing over with the jet stream lower than it used to be, and more consistently through that middle part of the USA. That's all been since Fukushima, and that's burned out. How many hundreds of homes and how much damage has been done to highways and everything else is incredible. That Fukushima has just ravaged that central part of the country, which is not very heavily populated, which is why no one takes notice of it. But it is very strategic. The country divided into the north and in the south, right, and that's right in between. So it has divided the country. And strategically, it's very important, and we saw these very long pointy spaceships along that area, and then these incidents have occurred, and unrelenting weather. So the toll from Fukushima continues to go on and on and on in new and different ways to the detriment of the United States, where the USA is in pretty deep strategic in a strategic hole right now, and I think the election reflects that too. The election talk reflects this notion that the current government regime, you want to call it, has sort of dug a deep pit for the United States. It's going to be hard to dig out of there, and now with the Texas fires and what's been happening in California, the things that we've seen, all these disasters along the jet stream, has this lower jet stream. We're going to pay a heavy price for it. We're paying a heavy price for it now. It's going to get worse.
People never hear any talk about the radiation constantly being released at Fukushima. I'm not talking about the announced release of treated radioactive water. What a load of crap that is. But the stuff that just constantly is coming out of there, it's going up in the atmosphere, it's being picked up by the jet, it's coming over North America. We are being subjected to radioactivity all the time. We don't hear about it. I was trying to think. This is 13 years now, right? 13?
Yes.
Is it 13?
Yes, 13 years.
Okay. When we started covering this together, first time I had you on the program, and we just never stopped, was about a month after, 4 weeks, some short period of time after.
I was actually, in the beginning, able to get you phone calls from Fukushima, and then the Japanese government started cutting us off. And I remember we had one conversation midstream. You had a hard time reaching me. We connected, and then in 5 minutes they cut us off. They were ruthless, and absolutely was doing the studies by the seaside. Whereas the water in the tanks, retention tanks, that's like rainwater that came down after the event, and the main problem was tritium in there, cesium, things like that. But it's underneath the plant, the melted nuclear fuel that's caused a problem, and a lot of that leaked into the ocean. Was pushed out into the ocean. Right. And it kept moving along. The current there is very, very powerful current. You can see this current go along. And
that's the North
moved
Pacific,
further south
right?
And into the North Pacific current. It just pushed the radionucleotides right on. And so the United States really and Canada have really been the major victims of the Fukushima disaster, in a certain sense, more than Japan. Because Fukushima is it leans sort of out eastward from the rest of Japan. So then the current doesn't go very far before it turns into the North American current. It's not very. I was doing the research there that summer. It's not very far. It's not a long distance. It's like 100 miles, and then it turns toward the United States. Yeah. So
right toward Washington
State. It's sort of like all the garbage out of Fukushima, the deadly garbage, it has gone to the United States, and we can see the clouds, the weird pink clouds.
Oh yeah.
The sort of the white fog that was tritium, in the air. We see all that. It's all very visible. It was all heading to the States. So and it's landed in Washington very early, and there was a huge Washington and Oregon, and there was a huge cover-up of the cleanup by prisoners. Washington State prisoners were cleaning the coast.
I was disgusted. First thing I did after this thing was I had outdoor planting beds. All right, they're 4 by 20 foot cedar beds. I covered those with plastic tarps immediately and bought a greenhouse and covered the beds so I wouldn't lose that soil, because we were measuring it, and it was not good.
What you're saying is it's amazing how simple your defenses can be, because the radioactivity and the moisture is coming, and the particles are coming in the rain.
We collected
rainwater. Very simple measure, like the low end, but it worked.
Yes, it did. I'd save mine.
You're alive. And people who didn't do it, they're not alive.
No.
That's the difference. It's so simple.
I'm going to paint a picture. Everyone pretend like we're all up on a satellite here, looking down at Japan, looking down at the Fukushima power plant, and how the debris, the radioactive death, the water and so forth, the nuclides go right out to sea, straight to the east of Fukushima. They go right on out, and there are two currents. One comes from the north down, and the other comes up from the south down, and these two currents literally meet and meld together and turn east together toward the United States, right off Fukushima, as you said, within 100 miles. And these two currents, one from up and one from down, come together. They don't mix together, and then they head toward the U.S., and it creates like a vortex, and it pulls all of that radiation right out of the Fukushima discharge grid and takes it across the ocean at about 12 miles an hour. That's about the speed, as I remember it. And it gets off the coast of Washington, Oregon, and it splits again. And half of it goes north, all the way up the British Columbia coast into the Gulf of Alaska, and there it terminates. It goes round and around and just kind of sits there. That's why so many salmon are ending up with tumors and steelhead and all kinds of problems. And the other half of it, or thereabout, goes south from Oregon, Washington, down the Pacific coast, all the way to Baja, the tip of Baja, and then it turns again and goes all the way across the ocean to the west, and then up and loops again back toward Fukushima. It's a circular deal. It's quite an amazing setup to transmit all of this death and it's constant. 25 hours a day.
It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And again, Fukushima, they're doing their fourth major dump of that tank water out of the tanks. So that stuff is coming over right now as we speak. It's landing on the U.S. coast. So that's obviously going to begin to turn to that sea fog that's going to move inland, and we're in for it for another summer of once it starts to heat up on the West Coast. That's when all the water evaporates, but leaves all this tritium and all these other nuclear compounds in the air and on the ground, in the trees and the grasses, and we'll have the major forest fires, whatever we haven't had already.
And what happens when the fires burn, ladies and gentlemen? It burns up grasses, trees, and it takes that radiation right up into the air as smoke. That's exactly right.
Yeah, smoke, and it goes right into people's homes. It's lethal, very deadly, and the United States is a very tired society now. There's this kind of a sadness, a tiredness, and these are really symptomatic of what we suffered from in Japan. Everyone feels depressed, tired, like they don't have any happiness in life anymore. And that same
I don't
sort
see
of depression,
smiles out.
Yoichi,
I don't see many people smiling.
No. It wears you down. People feel worn, and so there are these physiological effects before the cancers and all set in. And then you have all the problems with the miscarriages and all that. And America's in a panic over miscarriages, a big controversy, because women women are having a lot of reproductive problems that no one will attribute to radioactivity, in the ovaries.
We have radioactivity, and we also have these bioweapon injections, which are destroying reproductive systems of both males and females, as we know.
Yeah. So these things have been happening. The other thing is that while this is the 13th anniversary of the 13 years ago Fukushima disaster, add 14 years to that, and you have 27 years ago was the Kyoto Summit, which kicked off this whole season of disaster. The Kyoto Summit, as you know, was against the burning of coal and oil and release of smog into the atmosphere, and it began the great conversion of the world toward nuclear power. And the whole idea, in that summit, I was in Tokyo. I was editing with the Japan Times then, and I actually put out the main Japan Times edition for the summit, welcoming Al Gore, Vice President Al Gore, who is, of course, his base of power is the Tennessee Valley Authority, which has 4 major nuclear plants. They're all government. It's a government facility, basically, a government range, and the Oak Ridge nuclear plant, which did most of the nuclear processing for the world's first atomic bomb, as you see in the movie Oppenheimer. So, but the two main financial sponsors of the Kyoto Summit, which really began the green, this whole ecology movement.
Well, that's the globalist
climate change.
Movement.
The whole climate change movement. The two sponsors were Tokyo Electric Power Company, the owner of Fukushima, and why they built Fukushima was to create electricity for Toyota, which was basically the main producer of the electric vehicle, the EV, the electric car, So when you see people driving EVs and you see these Tesla recharging stations, that's all the child of Fukushima, of nuclear power. So you see out here in the... go ahead,
There's a big rebellion against electric vehicles now. People are realizing they're just junk. The whole theory of them has been anything but a money saver or environmentally friendly. And there's some reports now that say they're far more polluting than a regular gasoline vehicle.
Yeah, nearly a ton of...
they go away.
Toxic minerals in their batteries.
And those batteries... Hey, how about sitting in a car where you're sitting on top of, I don't know, 20 batteries or whatever, right underneath the floorboard, and you're in that electromagnetic
Imagine what that's
soup.
doing to your reproductive system and to your organs. My God. So it is insanity. And then the other problem. See, what the problem with electric car, especially in the West, all over the United States, is because there's been a declining interest in building new nuclear plants because of the enormous costs, and a lot of places don't want them because of the waste that they generate. That they pollute the water around them. Because you need water as a coolant. The real problem is that we're extending. Like here in the West, the Palo Verde nuclear plant, which should be shut down in Arizona, right outside Phoenix, or more infamously in California, Diablo Canyon, the Devil's Canyon.
I can't believe that's still functioning. For any of you who don't know, look, hold on, Yosh, 1 second. Look at a map of California. Look above Santa Barbara, about 80 miles, something like that, and you'll find it. It's near San Luis Obispo, and it is right there on the ocean, and if that plant were to melt down, it would annihilate all of Southern California. It could take it all out.
I've already done sort of a report on that. I think, it was for you, Jeff, was that the leakage out of there, the steam that it releases, because it's such an aged plant, it should have been shut down like 6 years ago, and the governor is just recently signed to keep it going for another 3 to 5 years. He does, it's going to be to power electric vehicles. That's the source of all the radioactivity that destroys the bones, the cartilage of racehorses at the Santa Anita racetrack, outside of LA. So it is killing people in Southern California.
Santa Anita. Do you remember? I'm sure you do. It was last year or the year? No. It was several years ago, I believe now.
Yeah.
And they were talking about a lot of racehorses who were falling over dead at the tracks.
Yeah,
not just Santa Anita.
And their hearts were weak.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Santa Anita.
Yeah, and that's radiation. That's radioactivity at work.
And that's right there from that Diablo Canyon plant. It goes along the San Gabriel mountain range. All the winds just blow it off the ocean, and it goes to Santa Anita, and that's where all the horses were dying. And so
they did, and that wasn't the only track. There were another couple of others, but they lost 30 or 40 horses during the season. Something crazy.
Horses. It's insane. So this is the damage being done, and no politician and very few scientists want to fess up to what's going on. So
lie of omission. Hold on a second, and Yoshi and I will be right back with more. 13 years since Fukushima. Hold on. Okay, welcome back. Talking with Yoichi Shimatsu, our colleague of all these years since the Fukushima catastrophe, and it hasn't gotten better. There's no resolution for this that we're going to see anytime soon. It's not going to happen. Wasn't there some guy that died in there, and his body was on some kind of a cam? They sent a camera in there.
There was a leak out of Fukushima from some of the workers there of a body that they saw there. It was a very heavy Asian man, and it was very ghoulish picture. He was sitting in irradiated water. His clothes had been melted away. They were gone, and his skin was gone. This is it's like a Halloween thing, and you can see his chest muscles, but they had a lot of holes in it, and from what I could tell, his face was sort of blurred, so you couldn't see that, but obviously a similar sort of thing, very ghoulish pictures. A worker who had somehow been sent down and must have slipped and fallen into one of the water pools there in Fukushima, and the radioactivity preserved him, so there's no bacteria surviving down there. So, because the radiation is killing all bacteria, so he's not rotting, but he's parts of him is melting with fats melting away, and it's very weird. And I was looking at him, and I'm thinking, God. Most of the guys I've met at Fukushima were younger men. This was in the early stage, and they were from the two very, very poor areas. They're sort of ethnic minority areas in Japan, from Okinawa and then from Hokkaido, Asahikawa, Hokkaido. And these are guys like who didn't do too well, and they're from poor communities to begin with. Guys who didn't do too well, maybe had a divorce or something like that, had debts, or gambled and drank, and they were recruited to work at Fukushima, sort of as suicide warriors. This was told to me by one of the contractors who I met right near the plant. And we had a chat outdoors. He was astonished to meet me and wanted to tell me a few of the horrible things that were going on. These guys from very poor communities were recruited, and he said that as soon as a worker, usually the health problems with radioactivity are detected through a bloody nose. He says that's the first symptom you see. So as soon as a guy gets a bleeding nose, that very same day, they would pack him up and send him back home, okay? And he said the recruiters for these guys were Yakuza, they're gangsters, okay?
Yeah.
So there's a veil of silence over this whole contract labor system, and they made sure no one died in the plant, okay, on the job. They would ship them out immediately to get them out of there to remove any evidence. Now, these guys tended to be very skinny, not a very good diet, unemployed. I met some of the younger guys, also very thin guys. They had a hard life, all these people.
Right.
This guy's very heavy, and I had just I'd seen it before, but I got a DVD of this Jackie Chan movie about illegal workers, Chinese workers in Japan, called Shinjuku Incident, Shinjuku Jiken in Japanese, and it struck me the guy's Chinese, they tend to put on weight.
Throwaway, another throwaway.
They
hired hundreds of those people. Maybe thousands.
Yeah, they're using a lot of people from outside the country, from Asia, and from Latin
Indonesia,
America.
Malaysia. I think they went everywhere.
Yeah, expendables. Totally. Yeah. And then I realized that's for the body weight. He has a Mongol bloodline, right? Some of the Chinese are very heavy from that northern Mongol bloodline. Yeah.
Endomorphic, as they say. Big physiology.
Yeah. So. That I realize is what that photo was about. Horrific, horrific. And that's why the Japanese will put a picture out of him, because he is a foreigner. It was just not like offending the spirits of the family and all that.
You got it. Right? You got it.
He serves as evidence. He's a foreigner, expendable, and therefore serves as some sort of evidence. And Tokyo Electric just put the clamp on, the Japanese government put the clamp on it, and that was that, And, oh boy, what a nightmare.
Well, actually, when you think about as bad as Chernobyl was, Fukushima, I think, on a world stage, just really walks away from Chernobyl. That was horrible. But what Fukushima's done...
Chernobyl was containable. Was actually
with the
contained.
Helicopters and the concrete. Not Fukushima. It destroyed most of the northern Pacific Ocean. And, of course, we know that the Fukushima radiation went worldwide in the seas. It just goes everywhere. So they just did a number on these 95% of the big fishes in the Pacific were gone.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if they're coming back or not, but they were gone.
Look, you don't see too many sushi bars anymore. Remember, they were the rage.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see them anymore because, it's the northern fish, which in very cold Arctic water, that northern Pacific current, and have a firmer flesh, much firmer, and their fat doesn't have the stench of fish from, let's say, the warmer areas of southern Pacific or the mid-Atlantic. So without those northern fish, the kill-off of those fish has basically killed off the sushi industry. It used to be everyone was crazy about it, and would go. And some people go twice a week there. You don't see these, these little sushi bars with the little boats that go around in circles and serve you that stuff.
And those little water channels. They'd have a boat going by, and you could grab what you want off of it.
Sushi has gone extinct.
I remember that. Yeah,
that's a lot of species. That's a lot of
strontium bars now. Strontium bars, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a horrible way. That's a horrible way of putting it. So there's been great changes. Oh, there's another. This nuclear issue keeps hitting us in the weirdest ways that people may not detect. Living in Japan, working in Japan, I got closer to the situation because I do a lot of business reporting, technology reporting. Right now the big controversy for the Biden team, and I don't trust Joe Biden one bit on this issue. I have to warn my
How about any issue?
My brethren, the United Steelworkers Union, U.S. Steelworkers Union. I was a member of it in the 1970s. Would you believe? Okay, a long time ago. Right after college, there was no jobs. The Arab oil boycott was on. The economy collapsed. But I worked as a steel worker at Republic Steel in Gary, Indiana, and then at U.S. Steel in South Chicago, the one that Barack Obama said there used to be a steel mill here, and now it's a housing complex. Well, I worked there at that mill as a millwright because I worked as a repairman, basically a machine repairman, fixing machines, welding, doing all the stuff with metal to get the darn plants rolling. And it's a swing shift place, so you work a morning shift one day, 1 week, then the late afternoon shift, an evening shift the next week, and then the night and the midnight shift the following week. It was round the clock. It was a hard job. The plant, U.S. Steel there, had 20,000 workers at its prime, and when I was there was only 600. Okay, only 600. And we were all new hires, temporary, for one purpose. See, at Republic Steel, I worked at a pipe mill, similarly, tiny, hardly any workers left there, making pipe for the Alaska pipeline, an oil pipeline, okay? Then, as we were finishing the pipes for the Alaska pipeline, I figured I got to jump ship, literally, because I'm going to get laid off in the next couple of months. So I applied to U.S. Steel, because U.S. Steel was making all the steel for the oil platforms, for all the platforms you need for oil, and for storage and all the tanks and all that, and also for the oil tankers, okay? So I had another year and a half. I worked there, and I worked at U.S. Steel, and as a steel worker. And so I was a member of the Steelworkers Union, and I got paid very, very well, which enabled me, after the mills shut down, to move to New York, where I got into art and then into publishing, and that's where I became a journalist for the first time. I managed to, just by fluke, become an editor of a business magazine, just by a fluke. So, and that's how I got into media. But
interesting.
Right?
What did you study at Purdue? What did you study at Purdue?
I studied at first biochemistry, but my professor was assassinated because he was chief scientist for Eli Lilly. And I was going to work at Eli Lilly, and they murdered my professor, and 10 of us dropped out of the program because it was so weird, because it was never reported in any newspaper or anything. And we had just been down to Eli Lilly, where they were recruiting us to work for them under a 20-year contract with oath of silence. And it wasn't and we didn't know what it was just so spooky that 10 of us said, we can't stay. This is just too weird. They won't tell us anything of what's going on. 35 years later, there was an article in the New York Times I read. At that time, Eli Lilly was producing for the MK Ultra program. They were producing what's the name of the hallucinogenics?
Oh, LSD.
For the MK. LSD for and so he was murdered. He had a sports car. They found him there with a bullet in his head and his gun in the passenger seat. They killed him.
Well, so, it's just like the poor Boeing guy last week.
Yeah. What happened there was he was the youngest professor of biochemistry in the history of biochemistry. Brilliant. He was a millionaire by the time he was 19 from all the inventions he made, but they murdered him nonetheless. So anyway, knocked out of my area that I was heading into, I had to become a welder and then a steel worker. But what it means today now is that Nippon Steel is trying to take over U.S. Steel. And U.S. Steel
I was just going to read you that. Here, in December, three months ago in December, U.S. Steel announced they would be selling the company to the world's number 4 steel maker, Japan's Nippon Steel.
Yeah.
The deal was valued at $14.9 billion, so there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, U.S. Steel, I'm going to write you an article, in fact, from Rense.com about some of this, about some of the background, the historical importance. It was created by a young fellow who had immigrated from Scotland, and became American citizen. It was a real hustler, a very quick-witted young fellow named Andrew Carnegie. So you've heard of you heard of Carnegie University College and then the Carnegie Institute and all that. He was a brilliant, quick-witted fellow and made U.S. Steel, based on the Bessemer steel process. But anyway, why is Nippon Steel has many reasons why it wants to buy into the U.S. market, because there's not a lot of construction going on in Japan. Japan's topped out. There's not much space. They built very strong buildings that will last another 100 years. They don't have much of a market in Japan or Asia. China's got their own steel mill. The third world's steel mills have developed there. Why do they? One of the strongest reasons they want to buy U.S. Steel is because Nippon Steel is the world's primary producer of very tough key parts for nuclear plants. And the U.S. has a whole lot of nuclear plants that are deteriorating. They're getting old, and they can use...
I think they're all past their shelf life, aren't they? They're all on extended life contracts.
Nippon Steel would like to replace these old, aging, basically hole-filled pipes, and to replace them with stainless, very strong stainless steel parts. Now, they have a problem. They've been selling these to the French nuclear plants, but French nuclear plants, a lot of them are more advanced than U.S. nuclear plants, much hotter temperatures, much more nuclear bombardment. And some of those parts have cracked. So they basically lost the French market. So they want to take over the American market, where you don't have quite as up-to-date nuclear plants. So I'm against the idea. I think they should not take over U.S. Steel. They can have a joint venture to make parts for plants, but I think that's a very, very bad motive, because if Nippon Steel does get a grip on U.S. Steel, it will be very opaque, just like the Tokyo Electric Power Company. It will be very difficult for American regulators to understand exactly what's going into these refurbished U.S. nuclear plants, The Department of Energy is not the brightest bunch of fellows in the universe. So I think there's strategic reasons, and for, safety reasons, you have to keep the two companies separate and have a joint venture, and have the Department of Energy and also independent analysts trying to understand what kind of parts are going into these nuclear plants. Otherwise, we could have a sudden disaster like Tokyo Electric Power had. So I'll be writing about this. So there's an imminent threat if, let's say, Tokyo Electric fudges, or there's a fatal mistake in some of these parts, and let's say plants in the Great Lakes region, a couple of plants, go up in smoke. That's it for the USA. It's over. We don't have a country anymore.
Hey, I have a question. This is a question. There is a move now, and some say, that the future of nuclear power may be in these, I don't know what they call them, micro-nuclear reactors, neighborhood nuclear reactor, whatever.
Yeah, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are partnered in these smaller.
What do you make of that?
The problem is the nuclear waste that comes out of that. The presumption they have is
drive it through town.
Yeah, and I wrote about that problem at the Vatican Observatory in Arizona.
Oh, in Arizona.
I went to the top of the mountain, and I found all this radioactivity. They wouldn't let the gate, at the very top of the mountain, the gate was locked. I couldn't get in. But I was only like about 40, maybe 30 to 40 feet below the gate, and there was a massive amount of radioactivity there, and the observatory had been shut down. And there supposedly was a power line put in by the local power company along the roadway, but I checked the side of the roadway. There was no power. There was no underground power line going up to the plant. So they had one of these mini nuclear plants. Okay, one of the Gates Buffett ones, and the thing blew up. Okay, and Safford is pretty radioactive because the radioactivity.
I remember when you went there. I remember.
Yeah.
That was
my discovery there. My discovery was really on the ground there because I checked the side of the road there going up the hill. There was no sign of any digging anywhere along that road. And had there been a power line, you'd also have warning signs and things of that sort along the way. So that didn't exist. So we know that those things don't work. They had a smaller version on Mount Everest that fell off Mount Everest and caused the huge disaster in the John Krakauer book, Into Thin Air. That revolved around a small mini power plant like that got blown off in a winter wind and went down Everest. And I played a huge role in that. I made videos and took on the British intelligence and CIA and Japanese intelligence to because they were screwing up. They couldn't recover it. And I was able to, at the time before the Beijing Olympics, I warned the Beijing Olympic Committee, you cannot cross Mount Everest as you wish to do with the Olympic flag unless you recover that thing. And they actually recovered it. The Chinese recovered it. They sent a team of 500 guys there. Half of them were civilians, half of them were military. They recovered it, and they quietly returned it to the British and the U.S. government. They found that reactor. So that was one of the little reactors up there. And the top of Mount Everest at the time I took my dosimeter was very radioactive. So,
you went up to the top of Mount Everest?
Well, I went to the base camp. Yeah, I went to the base camp. I didn't go to the very top. It fell off at this col below it's actually below the base camp. I got up to the base camp and nearly got in a serious fight with some of those guys up there, CIA guys. They had spies all along the way, British intel and CIA, tracking my whereabouts. It usually takes about 2 weeks to get up to the base camp. It took me 4 days. And people say,
you're amazing. I know how you do things.
Look, you've got to get up there, do what you're going to do, and you've got to get out of the high altitude on the 5th or 6th day before you start to get serious headaches and breathing problems and all that. So everything was timed to get this job done, get the video produced. Macaulay Val, this Taiwanese climber, was in that Into Thin Air. He was the fall guy. But Krakauer, after my report, he actually apologized to Macaulay Val for making him the fall guy and admitted he was wrong. And I think he pulled the book. I saw a lot of editions of the book on sale at bookstores, given away. Dumped basically because it was all a pack of lies. So so radioactivity is just this taboo. Sex in all its forms is no longer taboo. People wear it on their sleeve now. They're proud of it.
Oh, no.
But radioactivity remains the great taboo of our time.
It's true. I just wonder how they think they're going to if Gates gets away with it and pushes all these little micro-nuclear reactors, they'll probably try and modularize everything, and they're going to be trucking hot and spent radiation fuel throughout communities, down highways, all kinds of different ways. So it's just all nuts. We've got to get past that.
Yeah, their initial plan was just to blow it off into the air. Yeah. Now, now you haven't heard of these reactors. Now they're not for sale in Walmart catalogs, precisely because with nuclear waste. Yeah.
Now Toyota? Here we've got a couple minutes, 2 minutes left. Toyota has built. They didn't go with the EV. Toyota deserves a lot of credit for that. They stayed away from electric vehicles. And they have built I think it's a hydrogen fuel cell, a hybrid, might be a hybrid, but they've got another form of power. And I'm trying to find it here. I think it's hydrogen, some form of hydrogen.
Yeah, well, there again, the Tokyo Electric Power, the TEPCO, the disaster of 13 years ago sort of kicked Toyota in the pants, and they desperately moved toward the hybrid. Yeah, the hybrids, So
it's called, the MSRP is $50,000. It's 2024. It's called the Mirai, I guess, and it's... this is a very interesting deal. This Mirai combines hydrogen with oxygen from the outside air to generate power without creating any emissions.
Yeah, well,
that's
the problem
very
is you got to buy the hydrogen. You got to buy the hydrogen, but they're going to supply that. The word Mirai, by the way, means the future. It means the future. In Japanese.
Well, I think I'd much rather support this than any EV.
They were one of the culprits kicking with Tokyo Electric Power at the Kyoto summit.
Yes.
But they reversed course and decided they've got to go with a safer form of energy. So there is some repentance in some places, not many.
Yeah. Yoichi, thanks for staying up. Go get some rest, congratulations. 13 years, we'll keep at it.
Still kicking, amazing. Never expect it to last. All right.
Well,
okay, very good then. Thanks a lot for calling.
Okay, Yosh, good night. If you look on the left side of the homepage under columnists, look for Yoichi Shimatsu. His articles and essays are extremely he's brilliant. Very provocative, very unusual, and always worth a read. Always. All right, that's it for Wednesday. Back with you tomorrow night, Thursday. Have a good day. Have a practical day. And be careful out there.